Imagine crossing a line and suddenly stepping into a completely different world, where the laws, culture, economy, and even the landscape change in the blink of an eye. Borders aren't just political lines, they're places where contrasts collide. Today, we re-exploring 15 of the most mind-blowing international borders, where life on either side is like day and night. Start with number 1. This is the North Korea vs. South Korea. This is what the DMZ looks like. So this is the border between North Korea and South Korea. This area right here is called the Demilitarized Zone, or DMZ for short. It's a 4-kilometer wide buffer zone between the two Koreas. It was created in 1953 during the Korean War. So let's look at some of the differences between North Korea and South Korea. First off, let's talk about freedom. In South Korea, you have the freedom to speak your mind, practice any religion you want, travel pretty much anywhere you want, and even start a business with very little government interference. Whereas in North Korea, you don't have any of those freedoms. You are not allowed to speak your mind if you go against the government. You will be put in prison, or maybe even worse. The same goes for practicing any religion other than what the government says. And if you try to leave North Korea, you're not allowed to. If you try to flee the country, you will be shot. Alright, so what about the economy? Well, South Korea's economy is the 10th largest in the world. They also have the 4th highest GDP per capita in Asia with around $34,000, whereas in North Korea, their economy is mostly agricultural based. They don't have much industry or high-tech stuff going on. Now, technically, they do have a GDP per capita, but it's estimated that around 80% of people live below the poverty line. So yeah, that's how bad their economy is. Alright, now let's talk about electricity. So in South Korea, 95% of people have access to electricity. That's actually higher than the world average of 92%. But in North Korea, only around 65% of people have access to electricity. And now we're going to talk about their infrastructure. So this includes roads, bridges, public transportation, and internet. So in South Korea, they have an extensive road network, over 240 bridges, a very fast train system, and almost 90% of the population has internet access. In North Korea, their road network is lacking, especially when it comes to paved roads. A lot of their bridges are old and were built during the Japanese occupation. Only around 22% of the population has internet access, and that's mostly propaganda websites. The next thing I want to show you guys are nighttime satellite images of North Korea and South Korea. These are absolutely shocking. These images are from a channel, takes satellite images and posts them on his channel. So these are just some of the big cities in South Korea at night. Seoul, Busan, Incheon, Gwangju, Daegu, and then right here is North Korea. Can you see the difference? It's literally like a black and white image. It's crazy how South Korea is so developed and advanced, and then North Korea is so far behind. So hopefully one day, North Korea can catch up to South Korea. One day, maybe they can have the freedom that we have in South Korea. Start with number 2. There are 2 sides to this country. One side is lush and green, and the other side is completely deforested. It's one of the most striking images on Earth, and if you look closely, you can see why. The green side is Haiti, the deforested side is the Dominican Republic. And this is why they're so different. The Dominican Republic has visible laws against deforestation. In fact, you can see the areas where they've cut down trees in the past, but now they've replanted them, and they're protected by law. That's why we have this visible line across the island. I flew over this area in 2019, and it was such a shock to see this firsthand. The entire country of Haiti is deforested because of how they farm and use the land. But it goes beyond that. In 1986, there was a coup d'etat in Haiti. There was a lot of international involvement, including from the United States, and this led to decades of civil war and instability. Because of this, people were desperate to leave Haiti, so they fled to the Dominican Republic. In 1986, there were only about 500,000 Dominicans living in the country. Today, there are over 11 million Dominicans and over 10 million Haitians live in the Dominican Republic today. That's almost double the population. And this puts a strain on their resources. When people are desperate, they will do anything to survive. And for many Haitians, that means cutting down trees for lumber, or using them for firewood to cook meals. this has a devastating effect on the environment. And when you look at the two countries side by side, it's really heartbreaking. In the last 30 years, the Dominican Republic has passed laws to protect its forests. They've created national parks and reserves where logging is illegal. They've also planted millions of trees across the country. You can see the results of this in the north of the country. This is where the deforestation has stopped, and the forests have started to return. On the other hand, Haiti has continued to lose forest cover. Only 1% of Haiti's land is covered in trees. That's one of the lowest percentages in the world. And what's even more incredible about this story is that these two countries were once one. In 1844, the western part of the island declared independence from the Dutch. They became the Republic of Haiti. But just 100 years later, the eastern part of the island, which we now call the Dominican Republic, also declared independence. If you zoom out, you can see that the entire island of Hispaniola was once covered in forest. But over time, the people of Haiti cut down trees for lumber, charcoal, and firewood. Because of this, the soil quality has dropped. There's more flooding, and extreme weather has made it difficult for new trees to grow. The situation in Haiti is so dire that if they don't do something now, there will be nothing left for future generations. They need to plant millions of trees and protect the forests that they have left. If not, the whole country could become a desert. It's amazing to see the difference between these two countries. The Dominican Republic has shown that it's possible to stop deforestation and allow nature to return. If they hadn't taken action, it's likely that their country would look like Haiti today. So let's take a moment to thank the people of the Dominican Republic for protecting their forests. And let's hope that one day Haiti can do the same. Start with number 3. The United States and Mexico are two separate countries with distinct cultures and histories. However, they share a 2,000-mile-long border and have significant ties to each other. The differences between the two countries can be seen in many aspects of their societies, from economic opportunities to cultural norms. So let us compare the United States and Mexico across various factors and explore what sets these two neighboring countries apart. Let's start with the economy. The United States has a larger and more diverse economy than Mexico. The US has a higher GDP and a more developed industrial and technological sector. The average income in the United States is higher than in Mexico, although there is a significant income inequality. In contrast, Mexico has a lower GDP per capita and a less diversified economy. A larger portion of its economy relies on industries such as agriculture and manufacturing. Despite these differences, both countries have faced economic challenges in recent years, including trade disputes and fluctuations in currency exchange rates. Next, let's talk about infrastructure. Here at the United States generally has better developed infrastructure than Mexico. Its transportation systems, including highways and airports, are often more extensive and modern. The US also tends to have better access to clean water and sanitation facilities. However, some parts of the country, especially in rural areas, may not have the same level of development. Mexico has made progress in improving its infrastructure, but it still faces challenges, such as limited access to safe drinking water and an ongoing need for investment in transportation systems. Both countries have aging infrastructure that requires maintenance and upgrades. But the US, being a wealthier country, typically has more resources allocated towards maintaining and improving its infrastructure. Another important area of contrast is education. The United States places a strong emphasis on education and has a higher literacy rate than Mexico. There is a greater access to educational opportunities, including higher education in the United States. However, educational challenges persist in both countries. Issues such as inequality in access to quality education and the rising cost of higher education are present in both the US and Mexico. While both countries have made efforts to improve their education systems, the United States generally performs better in international assessments of math and science skills. Healthcare is another area where differences exist between the two countries. The United States has a more advanced healthcare system with greater access to medical specialists and cutting-edge treatments. However, the US healthcare system is complex and expensive, and millions of people remain uninsured. Mexico's healthcare system faces challenges such as limited access to quality, care in rural areas, and a shortage of healthcare professionals. Despite these challenges, Mexico has made efforts to improve its healthcare infrastructure and has implemented programs to provide more affordable and accessible healthcare services to its citizens. Now let's talk about culture. The United States is a melting pot of cultures, with people from all over the world coming to live and work there. This has created a society that is very diverse and accepting of different cultures. However, there can still be tension between different cultural groups. Mexico also has a rich and vibrant culture that has been shaped by its indigenous roots, colonial history, and modern influences. It is known for its colorful celebrations, delicious cuisine, and warm hospitality. Border towns like Tijuana and San Diego are interesting because they offer a glimpse into the blending of cultures between the two countries. Tijuana is a bustling city with a lively atmosphere, while San Diego is known for its beautiful beaches and family-friendly attractions. People travel between these two cities for various reasons, including tourism, business, and medical care. The exchange between these two border towns highlights how the United States and Mexico have influenced each other's culture. Despite their differences and challenges, the United States and Mexico have a long history of close ties. They have worked together on issues such as trade, immigration, and security. And the relationship between the two countries continues to evolve as they address new challenges and opportunities. So in conclusion, the United States and Mexico are two distinct countries with their own unique characteristics and challenges. From their economies to their cultures, these two neighboring nations offer a fascinating study in contrasts and similarities. As both countries continue to grow and change, it will be interesting to see how their relationship evolves in the years to come. Start with number 4. Have you ever heard of the Wagah border? Every day at sunset, soldiers from two countries gather at this spot. They're highly trained, disciplined, and very, very angry. Every day they perform a military ceremony here. It's called the Wagah border closing ceremony. These soldiers are from India and Pakistan. Their countries are separated by just one border. But for these soldiers, it's an international divide. They see each other as enemies. The reason is partition. In 1947, when India gained independence from British rule, the subcontinent was split into two pieces. One piece became Pakistan. The other piece remained India. But this did not bring happiness. It brought a lot of sorrow, misery, and anger. For India, Pakistan is an enemy. Pakistan, India is an enemy. Why? Because of one simple reason: Kashmir. This tiny slice of land is the reason why these two countries cannot live in peace. They keep fighting over it. Sometimes they fight with weapons. Sometimes they use their words. But every day they do one thing. They perform this military ceremony called the Wagah border closing ceremony. It takes place every evening at the Wagah border. Thousands of people gather here to watch it. The ceremony begins with a flag lowering. Soldiers from both sides march up to the flag post. They lower their flags together. It's a huge flag. It has the same colors, green, white, and red. But these two flags have different symbols. One has a star and a crescent. The other has a sun. These symbols divide the crowds that gather here. On one side, we have Indians. On the other, we have Pakistanis. They shout patriotic slogans. They dance and jump with joy when their flag goes up or comes down. But this happiness does not last long because soon it's time for the flag exchange. Soldiers from both sides march forward. They exchange the flags. Believe it or not, this exchange has a lot of tension. Sometimes the flags are exchanged like this. There is no problem. But sometimes things go out of hand. These soldiers start pushing each other. They try to grab the flag first. It all looks very dramatic. It also looks very dangerous. But wait, there is more. After the flag exchange, the soldiers get into a push-up contest. Yes, you heard that right. So they try to push each other. Whichever side pushes the other side, their soldiers cross the borderline. If they cross the borderline, they will be in enemy territory. This part of the ceremony is full of drama and aggression. Soldiers get very close to each other. Sometimes they even fall on the ground, but nobody helps anybody. Everybody remains angry. And finally, the most dangerous part of the ceremony arrives: the retreat. Both sides start marching back. They keep looking at each other. They keep trying to intimidate the other side. And all of this is done with military precision. You won't believe what happens next. At the end of the ceremony, both sides come face to face. They stand just 2 meters apart. They glare at each other for a few seconds. Then they start shouting and screaming. This is what soldiers do every day at the Wagah border. They shout on Tenya slogans. They shout on Tipakistan slogans. Believe it or not, this has been going on for 75 years. After all this tension, finally comes the moment of truth. The soldiers turn and walk away. They have to walk very fast. If they slow down, they may run into each other, so they keep a very fast pace. Soon they disappear from view. Once they disappear, the crowds start cheering. The ceremony is over, but this border remains shut. No ordinary citizen can cross this border. Only special people can do that, like politicians or religious leaders. But they too are very, very few now. Why do these people perform this ceremony every day? The answer is simple. It's to keep the soldiers busy. This border is a flashpoint. Any mistake can lead to war. So instead of letting the soldiers get bored, they keep them busy with this ceremony. It may look colorful and attractive, but don't be fooled. There is a lot of tension here. A little mistake can lead to a big disaster. Today, India and Pakistan are arch rivals. Their rivalry in sports is famous all over the world. But tomorrow, who knows? Maybe they could become friends. But until then, this border will remain tense. This border will keep reminding us how 2 countries became enemies. They were once a part of one country. They had one flag, one culture, and one religion. But now they have everything, but not each other. Start with number 5. This is Belgium, and this is the Netherlands. Now, if you tried to draw a border between these 2 countries, you would probably end up with something like this. But that's not how the border actually looks. Oh no. The border between Belgium and the Netherlands is incredibly weird. I mean, it quite literally splits some houses and restaurants in 2. So today we were going to find out why, and we were going to see what life is like when your house is split in 2 different countries. Welcome to Barl-Hertog in Belgium, and welcome to Barl-Nassau in the Netherlands. So let's start off with the really weird thing about this place. As you can see, both of these towns share the same name, but one is Belgian and the other one is Dutch. And the reason for that goes back to 1843, when these 2 towns were officially recognized as separate entities. They just so happen to have the same name, which has led to a lot of confusion over the years. In total, there are 22 municipalities in the Netherlands and 19 in Belgium. But here in Bar, there are only 2. The Dutch side is called Baranoes, and the Belgian side is called Bara-Herzog. But even though they have different names, the people who live here don't really care about the difference. I mean, their local football team is called De Baron Zwart, which translates to the Black Baron, and all the kids play together regardless of nationality. When I first arrived, I thought it would be easy to identify who was Dutch and who was Belgian, because one side would be full of Dutch people waving the Dutch flag, and the other side would be full of Belgians waving the Belgian flag. But that's not the case at all. I saw more people waving the European Union flag than I did national flags. It was until I went to a local bar and started talking to people that I realized there was a difference. See, on the Dutch side, people tend to be a bit more direct, and they love to complain. On the Belgian side, people tend to be a bit more relaxed, and they love to drink beer. But despite our differences, both countries have a lot in common. Both speak pretty much the same language. We both love fries, and we both have a very similar culture, and that's why it's so easy to get along. It's also why you will never see a border fence or border patrol in this region. The only evidence that there's a border here at all are the different colored speed limit signs and the road that turns into a different road on the other side. The strangest part about this whole situation is that the border completely splits some houses in half. There are even a few streets where one side is in Belgium and the other side is in the Netherlands. That means that if you want to visit your neighbor, you have to go through another country. I couldn't believe it until I saw it for myself. It really feels like something out of a cartoon. Some families even have their gardens split in half, which means they have to mow the lawn on the Dutch side and then run back to the Belgian side to finish up. If you're a pizza delivery guy in this town, you must have some serious stamina because you would be running up and down these streets all day long. Now, the way that the border splits some of these buildings might look random, but there is a method to the madness. You see, borders don't have to be straight lines. You can follow rivers, hills, or any other geographical feature. And this border was drawn up in 1226, long before GPS technology. And back then, this area looked a lot different. There were more rivers, more forests, and more hills. And the border followed a stream called the Bolsterbeek, which doesn't even exist anymore because it was covered up during the construction of a highway. Today, people are free to cross the border as they please. But if you're bringing agricultural products across, you need a permit. And even though the border isn't too hard to cross, it is a pain to deal with. When it comes to things like taxes, banking, and internet providers, it's almost like living in an international zone, except you're not allowed to gamble or buy cigarettes. And even though it might sound inconvenient to live in a place where your country changes depending on where you walk, I think it's kind of cool. It's a great example of how borders do and really matter when we have more things in common than that. We should all try to be a little bit more like the people here in Borla, because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to get by and no one wants to be bothered by someone else's stupid border. In this episode of China Through the Looking Glass, we're going to look at how China is different from Hong Kong by using a list. I'm a US-trained lawyer and your guide to the Chinese language. People often think of China as a country with no freedom. And while there are some areas where Chinese people definitely have less freedom than people in the US, it's not entirely accurate to say that internet freedom is non-existent in China. That's because Hong Kong is a special administrative region of China. But it's governed under the one country, two systems principle. So people in Hong Kong enjoy quite a lot of freedom, especially when it comes to the internet. Here's an example. You can see the difference between the mainland Chinese internet and the Hong Kong internet. If you can't see the Hong Kong version of YouTube on the mainland Chinese internet, it's blocked. But if you're watching this video, you're probably watching it on the Hong Kong version of YouTube, which has all sorts of videos that wouldn't be allowed on the mainland Chinese YouTube like this one. While Hong Kongers enjoy more internet freedom, mainland Chinese people are catching up. The Chinese government is encouraging its citizens to use the blockchain to fight fake news. They're also launching a new social credit system that rewards people for sharing positive content online. So will mainland China eventually look like Hong Kong? Will mainland China become a place with more freedom? Only time will tell. Let's talk about money. If you live in the United States, you probably use dollars, right? Well, Hong Kong has its own currency called the Hong Kong dollar. In fact, only two countries in the world use the Hong Kong dollar as their official currency. They are Hong Kong and Macau. This is an example of how China respects the autonomy of Hong Kong. By allowing Hong Kong to have its own currency, Hong Kong also has its own currency board to manage the currency. However, the Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the US dollar, meaning that one Hong Kong dollar equals approximately 7.75 US dollars. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority also sets policies to ensure that the value of the Hong Kong dollar stays close to the US dollar. So while you can use the Hong Kong dollar on the mainland, you cannot use the US dollar. Let's talk about driving. When I visited Hong Kong last year, I was shocked by how on the left side of the road, start with number 6, coming from the US, where people drive on the right side of the road. Everything was reversed in Hong Kong. Cars were driving on the left side of the road, and they were also passing on the left side. In fact, most countries drive on the right side of the road, just like the US, except for a few countries like the UK, Japan, and the Philippines. So while in Hong Kong, you have to get used to driving on the left side of the road. Mainland China is also moving towards driving on the right side of the road. So someday soon, you and have to get used to anything because everyone will be driving on the same side. Let's talk about politics. The way that China is governed is very different from the way Hong Kong is governed. For example, the chief executive of Hong Kong is elected by a committee of 1,200 people, whereas the president of China is elected by the people. Just kidding. Actually, the president of China is elected by the National People's Congress, which is made up of 3,000 delegates. Those delegates are elected by the people. The president of China serves a 5-year term, but he can serve for as many terms as he wants. There is no limit. The president of Hong Kong, on the other hand, serves a 4-year term, and he can only serve 2 terms. So while Hong Kong has many freedoms, it doesn't have the same political system as mainland China. And that's okay, because one country, 2 systems means that Hong Kong doesn't have to be exactly like mainland China. Speaking of borders, let's talk about the border fence. The border between Hong Kong and mainland China is marked by a fence. This fence was built in the 1990s and it's around 60 miles long. There are also several checkpoints along the border where people have to show their passports to get through. These checkpoints were set up to prevent illegal immigration and smuggling. Before the checkpoints, there were actually legal loopholes in the border that people could take advantage of. So the checkpoints were put in place to close those loopholes. Okay, so now we know about the differences between China and Hong Kong. But what about Taiwan? Is Taiwan also part of China? And if it is, why does it also have its own currency and political system? And if it's not, then why does China consider Taiwan a breakaway province? Start with number 7. Norway and Sweden are two different countries with two different sets of tax rules. In this episode, we're going to talk about one of them, the Great Norwegian-Swedish Shopping Spree. Welcome to this channel, by the way, where we try to answer the great geographic what-if questions of the world. Like, what if the Swiss really did take over Norway? What if the entire country of Finland was covered in snow? Or, in today's question, what if the neighboring countries of Norway and Sweden had slightly different tax rules? Because while these countries are fairly similar, they are different enough that people will plan shopping trips across the border to take advantage of the other's tax system. So let's talk about taxes. Taxes can be kind of a complicated subject, so I'm going to do my best to simplify this. The main tax that we're talking about today is value-added tax, or VAT. And both Norway and Sweden have a VAT of 25%. Which sounds like the same, but it isn't. Here's why. The way VAT works in both of these countries is that when you buy something, say groceries, that has been produced in another country, the store will add 25% of the price of those groceries onto your bill. So for example, if I were to buy a chocolate bar from Switzerland and bring it into either Norway or Sweden, then I would need to pay an additional 25% of the chocolate bar's price onto my purchase. That's how governments collect VAT. They add it onto the price of things that have been produced in another country. Now, sometimes stores will actually charge you VAT, even if the item was produced in the same country. This is especially true for services. But for simplicity's sake, let's just assume that all of the stuff being bought is produced in a different country. Where things get kind of complicated is that every country kind of has their own little rules as to how this VAT is collected. And this is where Norway and Sweden start to diverge a little bit. Say you're a Norwegian citizen living in, well, Norway. If you go to Sweden and buy a bunch of stuff, then that stuff will have 25% of its price added onto it in the form of VAT. That S, because Norway and Sweden are two different countries, and Sweden is going to collect VAT on the purchases that you make there. It's not going to know or care that you're a Norwegian citizen. You're in Sweden, you buy stuff, they're going to put VAT on it. But once you bring that stuff back into Norway, you can actually get that VAT money back. That's because Norway doesn't want to double tax you. It knows that you already paid VAT to the Swedish government, so it doesn't want to charge you again. So what you do is you keep your receipts from your trip in Sweden, and then you take those receipts to the Norwegian Customs Service, who will then refund you 25% of the price of those items, since that's the Norwegian VAT rate. Now, it's important here to remember that you've got to be a Norwegian citizen for this to work. A tourist from, say, the United States wouldn't be able to get that VAT money back once he brought those items back to the US. He's not a Norwegian citizen. So Norway doesn't care that he purchased those items in Sweden. What this means is that if you're a Norwegian citizen living in Norway, it makes sense to do your shopping in Sweden. Let's say that you need a new TV. You can buy a Norwegian TV from a Swedish store, get 25% of that TV's price back when you bring it back to Norway, and you'll end up saving quite a bit of money. Now, obviously Norwegians aren't stupid. They know that they can save money in Sweden, and that means that they often travel there to do their shopping. In fact, over the past few years, it's estimated that about 1.4 million Norwegians have gone to Sweden specifically to do their shopping. And now you know what you're thinking. Well, if this is such a big deal, why don't I just move to Norway and get 25% off of all of my Swedish purchases? Well, good news, you can. Actually, it's fairly easy to become a Norwegian citizen. You just need to speak the language, know the history, have lived in the country for a certain amount of time, not have a criminal record, and have lived in Norway continuously for 6 years. So yeah, it's not that hard. Still though, I think we can all agree that moving to a foreign country just to save 25% on a TV is unexactly worth it. One last thing I should mention is that over the years, there have been some pretty subtle differences between how Norway and Sweden approach this whole VAT thing. For example, sin sizes. Sin sizes are subtly different between Norway and Sweden. and often a Storacin will only just barely make it over the border. This is because as you drive through each country, the signage is usually larger and more elaborate, whereas the text on the signs themselves is often smaller. This is because, as you might imagine, the real estate in Norway and Sweden is probably quite expensive, and so they try to conserve that space. So the signs tend to be a little bit smaller, but also a little bit more detailed. Another thing that's subtly different are the speed limits. In Norway, the speed limit on many roads is 90 kilometers per hour, or about 56 miles per hour. In Sweden, that same road may only have a speed limit of 110 kilometers per hour, or about 68 miles per hour. Speed limits in both countries vary depending on the road, but this is generally speaking. Today, Norway and Sweden are both members of the European Union. So while there are still some differences between the two countries, not quite as big as they used to be. But this isn't the first time that these two countries have had different tax rates. And it probably won't be the last. Start with number 8 in Spain. They speak Spanish. In Gibraltar, they speak English. The official currency of Spain is the euro. In Gibraltar, it's the pound sterling. And finally, Spain is ruled by the Spanish monarchy. Technically a constitutional monarchy with a prime minister, but whatever. And Gibraltar is a British overseas territory with its own elected government. So how can it be that these two places are so close but are so different? Well, let's start with those differences. For one, even though Spain is overwhelmingly Catholic, Gibraltar is not. In fact, only about 10% of the population identifies as Catholic today. Protestantism is more popular in Gibraltar, as is a sort of practical atheism. And this brings us to our next difference: gambling. In Spain, it's illegal to gamble. In Gibraltar, they have a whole gambling district. And finally, despite their geographic proximity, the two places couldn't be more politically distant from each other. Spain is a staunchly anti-Brexit EU member. Gibraltar, well, it's a British overseas territory and Brexiters. Point being, if you're planning on moving to one of these places, you might want to consider which side of the fence you fall on. Because while the Rock isn't exactly known for its warm and fuzzy relationship with its mother country, it's even colder with its Spanish neighbors. Oh, what's that sound? Is that the faint sound of bagpipes? It is. And it's time for our next big question. Why do they play bagpipes in Gibraltar? Well, there's a couple of theories. One is that when the British took over the Rock in 1704, they brought with them a bunch of Scottish soldiers who played bagpipes. Another theory is that because bagpipes were traditionally associated with death, they were used to either scare off or identify the corpses of enemy soldiers. A third and final theory is that during the 18th century, the Duke of Wellington, who was in charge of defending Gibraltar, liked bagpipes, so he hired a piper to play at all military funerals. As a result, the tradition stuck around long after the Duke had kicked the bucket. Oh, now we're at the border. Hold on. The first thing you'll notice about this border is that it doesn't look like any other border in Europe. There are no fences, no barbed wire, just a single road connecting the two territories. Now, since we're in the European continent and not, say, North Korea, this does technically mean that if you're a citizen of any EU member state, you don't need a passport to enter either place, but the border is still heavily guarded. Technically, this is to prevent illegal immigration. But really it's because the Spanish don't like the Gibraltarians, and vice versa. And the best way to keep people apart is to make the journey between the two places take as long as possible. Hence the hundreds of police, the multiple checkpoints, and the absolute nightmare fuel that is this flyover. It takes 5 minutes to walk from one side of Gibraltar to the other, but the drive takes an hour and a half. That being said, if you do fancy a trip to the Rock, here are some things you should know. First of all, the vast majority of Gibraltar's economy is based on tourism and online gambling. This means that everything is geared towards getting your money. Taxis, restaurants, souvenir shops, they're all expensive. On top of that, because it's a British overseas territory, you will need a visa if you're coming from outside the UK. Having said all that, the Rock is full of amazing sights, from the famous Moorish castle to the cute monkeys that live in the Upper Rock Nature Reserve. Plus, if you like gambling, drinking, and smoking, you'll be in heaven. Just beware of pickpockets. Also watch out for those monkeys. They bite. you want to learn more about Britain's overseas territories, stay tuned for more information. Till then, here's another video we think you might like.
Start with number 9. The United States and Canada are two countries that share a continent, an ocean, and a whole lot of maple syrup. But despite their proximity, they couldn't be more different, at least in the eyes of Americans and Canadians. Some of the differences between these two countries are superficial, like the metric system versus freedom units, or the lack of universal health care in the US. Other differences run deeper, like the kind of health insurance that you have. Here are some of the ways that Americans and Canadians deal with illness and injury, from doctor visits to dental care and everything else in between. Most Americans get their health insurance through their employer. It's common for workers to have medical, dental, and vision coverage as part of their benefits package. In Canada, health insurance is publicly funded, which means that all citizens and permanent residents are eligible for the Canada Health Act, which covers medically necessary expenses such as doctor and hospital visits, diagnostic tests, and treatments. The best part, it's all free at the point of service. Canadians pay for this through their taxes, which is why some provinces have wait lists for non-urgent procedures. But once you get your surgery date, you don't need to worry about any of that. It's all taken care of by the government. In the US, the quality and types of insurance plans offered to employees can vary widely depending on the company. Some offer really great coverage, while others don't offer much at all. And if you don't get insurance through work, you can purchase a plan through the Health Insurance Marketplace, which was established under the Affordable Care Act. These plans tend to be more expensive and have higher deductibles than employer-sponsored insurance. And if you go to the doctor without insurance, you'll likely receive a bill in the mail with a hefty price tag. That's because the US has one of the highest rates of uninsured people among developed countries. About 75 million Americans were uninsured in 2020. Now, there are some Americans who love their healthcare system, and there are some Canadians who do love their healthcare system. But generally speaking, most Americans want universal healthcare, and most Canadians are happy with their healthcare system. Another big difference between the two countries is when it comes to prescription drugs. In Canada, the government negotiates drug prices with pharmaceutical companies and sets a maximum that they can charge. So Canadians pay less out of pocket for their prescriptions. In the US, there's no limit on what drug companies can charge. And while some insurers negotiate discounts with drug companies, those discounts don't always get passed on to consumers. So Americans often pay more for the same medications as Canadians. And that's just for the medications that are even available in both countries. The US has a notorious approval process for bringing new drugs to market. So, some drugs that are available in Canada aren't available in the US, and vice versa. Americans also pay out of pocket for many medical procedures that are covered by the Canadian healthcare system. For example, ultrasounds, and even cancer screenings can all be done for free in Canada, while Americans may have to pay hundreds or even thousands of dollars for those same services. However, some Americans do travel to Canada for cheaper prescription drugs and medical procedures. There are also some small towns that share services across the line. So if you live close enough to the other country, you might have access to better and cheaper healthcare, regardless of where you're from. For example, people living near the US-Canada border often use healthcare facilities in the neighboring country. And if you're looking for a dentist in Buffalo, New York State, you have 3 options: New York State dentists, New York City dentists or Canadian dentists across the border. That S because the Canadian province of Ontario requires dentists to complete 2 years of additional training after dental school, which makes it harder for them to get jobs in Canada. So many Canadian dental schools produce dentists who end up working in the US instead. So whether you need a root canal or a brain surgeon, you've got options, as long as you can find a way to pay for it. In the end, it's up to each individual person to decide what kind of healthcare they want. Do you want a system that guarantees coverage but has longer wait times? Or a system that allows you to see specialists quickly but might leave you with a huge bill? No matter what you choose, you should definitely brush up on your neighbor's healthcare system, because you never know when you might end up there.
Start with number 10, okay? Here's an interesting question for you. What do you think is more heavily guarded, Israel or Palestine? Because it's one of those questions that if you don't know much about the conflict, you might assume one thing. You might look at this image and think, well, obviously Israel. They have the tanks and the guns and the drones and the walls. But if you really understand the situation, you realize it's not quite that simple. Because the thing about these kinds of questions is that they always come with an asterisk. Like there's always some kind of caveat that makes things less clear-cut. For example, when people talk about security walls, they often mean the West Bank barrier, which separates the West Bank from Israel proper. And that wall is roughly 430 miles long. It's manned by Israeli soldiers. It's patrolled by Israeli dogs. It has surveillance cameras, motion sensors, concertina wire. There are checkpoints where Palestinians need permission to pass through. There are signs warning that non-Israelis need a permit to enter. The whole thing is designed to keep terrorists out. Except, of course, terrorists can tunnel under the wall. Terrorists can fly planes into buildings. Terrorists can sail boats into ports. There are other ways to get into Israel besides walking through the checkpoint. And besides, the wall isn't even continuous. There are gaps between the different sections, so it's not exactly impenetrable. So perhaps we should rephrase the question. What do you think is more heavily guarded? A, the Israeli side of the wall, or B, Palestinian cities like Jenin and Nablus, which are considered terrorist hotbeds and have been under siege by Israel for months? Because if you go to places like Jenin and Nablus, you will see something very different. You will see entire neighborhoods that have been destroyed. You will see houses that have been leveled. You will see olive groves that have been burned. You will see mass graves dug for fear of a massacre. You will see a level of paranoia and terror and destruction that you might associate more with a war zone than with a city. In fact, many Palestinians have described their cities as open-air prisons. Here's what I found most interesting. When I was reporting on the Israel-Palestine conflict, one of the things that struck me was how much more infrastructure there is on the Palestinian side of the wall. Roads and schools and hospitals and parks and hotels and all kinds of other public works projects that make life livable. On the Israeli side of the wall, there's a golf course, there's a hotel, and there's a luxury spa. But beyond that, the whole place feels like a military base. There are sandbags, barbed wire, watchtowers. It doesn't even feel like a country. It feels like an occupation. And let's be honest, this conflict has been going on for a very long time. 60 years, 70 years, over a century. If anyone here needs security, it's the Israelis. But maybe, just maybe, building a wall isn't the way to do it. Maybe at this point, it's time to try something else. That's it for this week. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Start with number 11. This is the border between China and Nepal. And Mount Everest isn't the only thing that's on it. Turns out the world's tallest mountain is also the world's best place to test your climbing skills. And because of that, both countries have built up infrastructure on their side of the mountain to help climbers get to the top. But which country is better to climb? The Chinese side or the Nepalese side? That depends on what kind of climbing experience you want. If you're an experienced climber looking for a challenge, then you'll probably want to go to the Nepalese side. But if you want a more comfortable, well-paved road to the summit, then the Chinese side is for you. Let me explain why. Okay, so there are two main reasons why climbers choose one side of Mount Everest over the other. The first reason has to do with access. Both countries have different base camps. For the Chinese side, there are two main routes, the northern and the northwest routes. These routes are considered more difficult than the routes on the Nepal side. As a result, the Chinese side has fewer climbing routes, but the ones that it does have are much more challenging. This means that the Chinese side is better for experienced climbers. The second reason has to do with the infrastructure, because the Chinese side is more dangerous. The Chinese government has spent more money making sure that its climbers have the best chance of survival. This includes building more roads, more supply depots, and more emergency shelters. So let's take a look at some of the differences. First, we'll start with the roads. The Chinese side has more and better roads. There are paved roads all the way from the base camp to the death zone. That's the area above 8,000 meters where most people die trying to climb Mount Everest. On the Nepal side, there are no roads. Instead, climbers must hike over rugged terrain for 2 weeks to get to the base camp. The only vehicles that can go to the base camp are jeeps, and they only go part of the way. So if you want a more comfortable ride to the base camp, then go to the Chinese side. But once you get there, you'll find that the roads are the only easy part of the climb. That's because the Chinese side is much more developed. There are paved roads, supply depots, and emergency shelters all along the route. On the Nepal side, there are none of those things. Climbers must carry all of their supplies with them, and there are no emergency shelters in case they get injured or sick. Of course, this makes the Chinese side much easier to climb, but it takes away from the challenge and the adventure of the climb. That's why many experienced climbers prefer to climb the Nepal side. Another difference between the two sides is the altitude. The Chinese side is higher than the Nepal side. This means that climbers have less oxygen to breathe while they're climbing. Of course, this makes it harder to climb, but it also makes it more dangerous. That's because when you're at high altitude, your body starts to shut down, your organs begin to fail, and your blood starts to boil. This is why most people die within 100 meters of the summit. But even though the Chinese side is more dangerous, it's still considered to be the easier side to climb because of the roads and the supply depots. One of the biggest differences between the two sides is the cost. A climbing permit on the Chinese side is about 3 times more expensive than a permit on the Nepalese side. In addition, you'll need to hire a guide and porters to help you carry your gear. All of this can add up to a very expensive climb. That's why many people choose to climb the Nepal side. It's not as comfortable or as safe, but it's a lot cheaper. So which side should you climb? Well, that depends on what you're looking for. If you want a challenge, then go to the Nepal side. But if you want a more comfortable and well-paved road to the summit, then the Chinese side is for you. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Start with number 12. There are many videos comparing Argentina to Brazil. But today, we are going to compare Argentina to Paraguay. Both countries are part of the Triple Frontier along with Brazil, and each country has its own unique culture and identity. So let's talk about the differences between these two countries. But before we do that, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you do and miss any of our upcoming videos. The first thing you should know about Argentina and Paraguay is that both countries are a cultural melting pot of many different nationalities. Both countries have people from all over the world living there, and this includes people from Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. Many people speak multiple languages, and in some cases, it is common for people to speak 3 or 4 different languages. However, despite all of this, there are still some major differences between the two countries. Let's start with their respective national languages. While it is true that many people in Paraguay speak Spanish, the official language of Argentina, it is also true that Spanish is not the only official language spoken in the country. Guarani is also an official language, and it is one of the most spoken indigenous languages in South America. The influence of Guarani can be seen in many aspects of Paraguayan culture, including its music, art, and literature. In fact, if you take a walk around town, you will see that many of the street names are in both Spanish and Guarani. On the other hand, Argentina's official language is Spanish. There are some regional dialects, but these are not mutually unintelligible with standard Spanish. This is unlike Paraguay, where there are significant differences between the way Spanish is spoken in the capital, Sunjin, and the way it is spoken in the interior. Another major difference between Argentina and Paraguay is their respective legal systems. Argentina has a civil law system, which is based on Roman law. This is in contrast to Paraguay's common law system, which is based on English law. This is because Paraguay was a Portuguese colony while Argentina was a Spanish colony. Paraguay's legal system is also influenced by its indigenous legal traditions. As mentioned earlier, indigenous people of Paraguay had their own legal systems, which were based on their respective cultures and customs. These legal systems were often unwritten and were passed down orally from generation to generation. When the Spanish and Portuguese arrived in Paraguay, they did not completely wipe out these indigenous legal systems. Instead, they incorporated some of these customs into their own legal systems. Perhaps the most well-known difference between Argentina and Paraguay is their respective attitudes towards organized crime. Argentina has long been infamous for its drug smuggling and money laundering activities. This is because of its strategic location near major drug-producing countries such as Bolivia and Peru. Argentina has also been a popular destination for money launderers due to its weak financial regulations. On the other hand, Paraguay is also known for its drug smuggling and organized crime activities. However, the level of violence associated with these activities is much higher in Argentina. This is because Argentina has a much larger population and economy than Paraguay. Therefore, organized crime groups in Argentina have more to gain financially. Additionally, Argentina is a more attractive destination for tourists, meaning that there is a larger potential market for illegal drugs. So those are just a few of the differences between Argentina and Paraguay. There are, of course, many more differences between these two countries, but that's why we make videos like this one. If you want to learn more about Argentina or Paraguay, then make sure to check out our other videos. We have a ton of videos comparing Argentina to other countries, as well as videos specifically about Argentina and Paraguay. Start with number 13. Germany and Poland are two European nations that share a lot of similarities, but also have some key differences. For example, these days you can travel seamlessly between the two countries without any border control, but it wasn't this way in the past, especially during the Cold War when these two nations had completely different political systems. While Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones controlled by the Western Allies, Poland became a satellite state of the Soviet Union. This division not only led to contrasting political systems, but also had a profound impact on their infrastructure. Today we're going to talk about the differences between Germany and Poland, focusing on 5 aspects that might surprise you. Before we start, make sure to subscribe for more videos like this. Alright, let's go. 1. The Berlin Wall. Probably the most visible and symbolic difference between Germany and Poland. During the Cold War was the Berlin Wall. This concrete barrier that sliced through the heart of Berlin was a stark reminder of the ideological divide between the communist East and the democratic West. But this wall didn't just materialize out of thin air. It was a response to the mass exodus of people from East Berlin to West Berlin. In the aftermath of World War II, Germany found itself occupied by the victorious Allies, who subsequently divided the nation into 4 zones. As the Cold War intensified, Soviet-backed East Germany became a communist dictatorship, while West Germany, controlled by the United States, France and Britain, became a bastion of democracy. This stark contrast in political systems led to a brain drain with highly skilled workers, professionals and intellectuals fleeing East Germany for the economic and personal freedoms of the West, to halt this outflow of its most productive citizens. East Germany erected the Berlin Wall in 1961, sealing off the communist eastern sector of the city. For nearly 3 decades, the wall stood as a potent symbol of the Cold War and the Iron Curtain. Its purpose was clear: to prevent people from escaping to the West. However, the wall's construction also symbolized the desperation of a regime that felt threatened by its own citizens' desire for freedom. You can learn more about the Berlin Wall through additional resources: 2 different architectures. Architecture is a reflection of a nation's history, values, and the tools available to build them. In the case of Germany and Poland, their architectural differences are a legacy of the contrasting ways in which they developed throughout their history. German architecture has traditionally been renowned for its grandeur and technical prowess. Think of the Gothic cathedrals like Cologne Cathedral or the majestic Neuschwanstein Castle. These structures showcase Germany's long-standing commitment to craftsmanship and innovation. On the other hand, Polish architecture, while equally captivating, reflects a different set of influences and priorities. Poland's medieval towns often feature charming but more humble structures made of brick, a nod to the country's unique building material and its historical struggles against larger, more powerful neighbors. The differing architectures between Germany and Poland are not merely aesthetic. They represent two distinct narratives of the same time period. 3. Roads. The condition of roads in rural areas can be quite telling of a region's development and priorities. In Germany, the Autobahn, a network of controlled access highways, is a point of national pride and a testament to their engineering excellence. These well-maintained roads are not just efficient thoroughfares, they're symbols of German order and efficiency. In contrast, Poland's rural roads often tell a different story. While major highways are seeing improvements, many smaller roads can be in poor condition, a reflection of years of underinvestment and the country's focus on more immediate development challenges. The disparity in road conditions between rural Germany and Poland isn't just about infrastructure. It's about priorities, planning, and the different paths these nations have taken in their post-war reconstructions. For agriculture, Germany and Poland both have significant agricultural sectors, but they approach it in different ways. Germany, with its advanced technology and higher labor costs, has moved towards large-scale industrial agriculture. This means bigger farms, more mechanization, and a greater production capacity. Poland, on the other hand, still has a significant number of small family-run farms. This traditional approach often focuses on local markets and the quality of the produce rather than large-scale industrial production. This difference in agricultural practices is a result of various factors, including the level of mechanization, land ownership patterns, and the relative importance of agriculture in each country's economy. 5. Work ethic. The work ethic in Germany and Poland differs significantly due to a variety of historical, cultural, and economic factors. Germany's work ethic is often characterized as diligent and precise. The German engineering and manufacturing industries have a reputation for producing high-quality goods, which is a testament to the country's strong work ethic. In contrast, Polish work ethic is often viewed as less reliable and more prone to improvisation. This is partly due to Poland's history as a nation that has often been subject to the whims of its more powerful neighbors, which may have fostered a culture of adaptability and quick thinking in the face of changing circumstances. Alright, that's it for today. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Start with number 14. Welcome to my channel. I have traveled to many countries, and today I will tell you all about United Arab Emirates and Oman. You will see how different these two countries are, even though they are neighbors. United Arab Emirates is known for its striking skyline and ultra-modern architecture. When you arrive in Dubai, you are greeted by this astonishing view. Here is the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. It dominates the city's skyline. There are also many other skyscrapers in the city. Just next door is Oman, a country with a rich history and tradition. You can experience an authentic Arabian lifestyle here. What's immediately noticeable when traveling between the two countries is the difference in road quality. The UAE has invested heavily in infrastructure, and the roads are smooth and well-maintained. Speed limits are also higher. In Oman, the roads are more like what you would find in a developing country. The speed limits are lower, and there are more trucks on the road. When I first entered Oman, I was surprised to see this sign. It says, "Welcome to Oman, land of contrasts." I couldn't agree more. In the United Arab Emirates, you can enjoy duty-free shopping at the airport. This means that you don't have to pay any taxes on the items you buy. That's great if you want to buy luxury goods such as designer clothes or perfume. In Oman, you will have to pay taxes on your purchases. Something else you should know about the United Arab Emirates is that it is home to around 200 different nationalities. That makes it one of the most diverse countries in the world. This means that you can experience many different cultures and religions here. If you want to learn more about other cultures, this is a great place to be. In Oman, over 90% of the population is Muslim. This is one of the most conservative countries in the region, and it follows strict Islamic laws. Alcohol is forbidden, and public displays of affection are not allowed. When you travel to Oman, you should dress modestly. This means that you should cover your shoulders and knees when you go out in public. You will be asked to dress this way when you visit mosques or other religious sites. But even when you're not visiting religious sites, it's always a good idea to dress respectfully when you're in a foreign country. Remember, you are a guest in their country, and you should respect their customs and traditions. Here in Oman, you must also be careful what you say. Insulting someone can get you into big trouble. If you are not careful, you may unintentionally insult someone, because the Arabic language is very different from English. Even if you mean well, it's important to be aware of the potential landmines. Another thing you should know about Oman is that it is a very safe country. Violent crime is rare, and you can walk around the cities without worrying about being mugged. However, it's always a good idea to keep your valuables out of sight. This is especially true in tourist areas where pickpockets may try to steal your things. In the United Arab Emirates, there are strict laws against drugs and alcohol. If you were caught with drugs or alcohol, you could go to jail. So be careful what you bring with you when you travel to the UAE. If you want to take a taxi, it's important to know that in Oman, taxis are metered, but they usually start the meter at a high number. This means that you could end up paying a lot of money for a short ride. In the United Arab Emirates, taxis are not metered, but the prices are regulated. This means that you will have to pay a certain amount for each kilometer you travel. One last thing you should know about Oman is that it is a beautiful country with a lot to offer visitors. From its stunning mountains to its amazing beaches, there is something for everyone here. If you are looking for a unique travel experience, then Oman is the perfect destination for you. I hope you enjoyed learning about Oman and the United Arab Emirates. Which country would you rather visit? Let me know in the comments below. Start with number 15. Today we're going to talk about Switzerland versus France. I am from a channel where everything is in French. So if you want to learn French with us, click the link below. Okay, let's start. What's the difference between Switzerland and France? Well, first of all, there are two different countries. So one is not part of the other. They are neighbors. But when I say that someone is Swiss, it means they come from Switzerland, okay? And when you say that someone is French, it means they come from France. Now, even though they are neighbors, prices aren't the same. So for example, in Switzerland, bread is 4 or 30. That's 4 Swiss francs for one piece of bread. In France, it's €1, 10 cents. So it's cheaper in France. And also, the rent is much more expensive in Switzerland than in France. For example, in France, you can rent an apartment for €600 per month. In Switzerland, at least 1,200 Swiss francs, which is more than €1,200. So generally speaking, everything is more expensive in Switzerland than in France. The second difference is the healthcare system. In Switzerland, you pay for your healthcare, so everyone has to pay for their health insurance. It's compulsory. You cannot drive without having a health insurance. In France, the healthcare system is different. Everyone has a health card. You don't have to pay for your healthcare. Of course, if you go to the doctor, sometimes you have to pay something, but generally speaking, it's free. And also, in France, you have the right to free healthcare if you're pregnant, if you have children, if you're over 60. In Switzerland, you have to pay for your healthcare. Okay. And the third difference is the language. In Switzerland, they speak German, French, Italian, and Romansh. In France, they speak French. Now, if you're in Switzerland and you speak German, people will understand you, but you might need a translator sometimes. If you're in France and you speak French, people will understand you because this is the official language of France. So you don't need a translator. The fourth difference is some homes have a French kitchen and a Swiss bedroom. What does that mean? Let me explain. Let's imagine you're visiting someone in Switzerland and they have a French kitchen. It means that the kitchen was made in France and they brought it to their house in Switzerland because they like French style. Or maybe they just found it somewhere and thought it was beautiful and bought it. It happens a lot. You know, people from Switzerland visit France and they buy things they like, bring them back home. The same thing happens with the bedrooms. Sometimes you find Swiss-style bedrooms in France. So why do you have a Swiss bedroom? Because maybe someone went to Switzerland, loved the style of the bedroom, bought it, and brought it back home to France. It happens a lot. People like taking things from other countries. It's normal. Another difference between Switzerland and France is the food. In Switzerland, they eat a lot of cheese and chocolate. In France, they eat a lot of cheese and wine. So these are the main differences. Now, what do they have in common? Well, both countries love cheese. Both countries have really good bread. And also in both countries, people are really polite. In France, you have to kiss 2 cheeks when you meet someone. Switzerland, you have to shake hands. It's a little bit different, but generally speaking, people are very polite in both countries. Okay, so now you know some basic differences between Switzerland and France. See you next time.